Hey, welcome to another episode of Psychology. It's Chapter 7. Today we're talking about memory. Section 1, Memory Classifications and Process. Memory can be classified as an explicit or an implicit memory. Two main types of explicit memory are episodic memory and semantic memory. Memory of sensory input involves three distinct functions: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Memory is the process of encoding, storing, and retrieving information. Memory includes factual and general information, experiences of events, and skills. So what you should remember from this section and should take your notes on are what are the three kinds of memory. How does encoding of memories work? And what are the processes of memory storage? What factors affect memory retrieval? Memory is the process by which we recollect prior experiences and information and skills learned in the past. There are three different kinds of memory. Episodic memory is a memory of which specific events. A flashbulb memory is a memory of an important or intense event, like the day your child was born, or your wedding day, the day you graduated, something like that. Examples of flashbulb memory were like the terrorist attacks in 9/11 or John F. Kennedy's assassination. Those are all a book before your time, but those are examples. Semantic memory is the process of memory, facts, words, and concepts. Episodic and semantic memories are both examples of explicit memory, which is memory-specific information. An implicit memory is a memory of things that are implied or not clearly stated. Implicit memory includes practice skills and learned habits. Skills learned often stay with people for a lifetime, even if they do not use them very often. Encoding. Encoding is the translation of information into a form in which it can be used and is called encoding. Encoding is the first stage of processing information. One type of code is visual. People who use visual codes when they form a mental picture. Another type of code is acoustic. People use acoustic codes when they use sound. Another type of code is semantic. A semantic code represents the information in terms of its meaning. Common semantic codes are such as "Every good boy does fine, remember the music scale," or "My very educated mother just served us noodles," to remember the planets. Roy G. Biv, as we've talked about before in here, it's a semantic code for remembering the color spectrum. Storage is the maintenance of encoded information. It's the second process of memory. Mechanical or rote repetition of information in order to keep from forgetting it is called maintenance rehearsal. The more time spent on it, the longer the information will be remembered. It does not connect information to the past learning and therefore is a poor way to put information in permanent storage. A more effective way to remember new information is to relate it to information you already know. The method is called Elaborative Rehearsal. It is widely used in education. Organizational systems or stored memories become organized and arranged in the mind for future use. In some ways, the mind is like a storehouse of files and file cabinets, in which you store what you learn and what you need to remember. Your memory organizes information into classes according to common features. Filing errors, or our ability to remember, is subject to error. Errors can occur because we file the information incorrectly. Retrieval. Retrieval consists of locating stored information and returning it to conscious thought. Retrieval is the third stage of processing information. Context-dependent memory are information that is more easily retrieved in the context or situation in which it was encoded and stored. Such memories are dependent on the place where they were encoded and stored. Memories that are retrieved because the mood in which they were originally encoded is recreated are called state-dependent memories. Memory is better when people are in the same mood as when the information was acquired. Now, we all have that experience where we remember something, but we just can't think of the name of it or the word or something like that. And it's right there on the tip of your tongue, but you can't remember it. Trying to retrieve memories that are not well organized or are incomplete can be highly frustrating, and sometimes we are so close to retrieving the information that it seems as though the information is on the tip of the tongue. Psychologists call this phenomena the feeling of knowing experience. Three basic memory processes exist, and in order to remember, sensory input must go through the three basic processes of memory encoding. Encoding, first of all, is encoding. It's translating sensory information into a form in which it can be stored. Encoding is the first process of remembering. Visual encoding enables information to be stored as pictures. Acoustic coding enables information to be stored as sounds. Semantic coding enables information to be stored as meaning. Storage. Storage is the maintenance of encoded information over time. Storage is the second process of remembering. Storage is achieved through two basic types of rehearsal: maintenance rehearsal and elaborative rehearsal. Maintenance rehearsal uses repetition to aid storage. Elaborative rehearsal aids storage by fitting new information into organizational systems. Elaborative rehearsal is generally more secure than maintenance rehearsal. Third is retrieval. Retrieval is locating stored information and returning it to conscious thought. Retrieval is the third and final phase of remembering. A memory is context dependent, and if it can be retrieved more readily when the person is in a similar situation or environment as when the information was learned. A memory is state dependent if it can be retrieved more readily when the person is in a similar emotional state as when the information was learned. Unreliable memories and unreliable witnesses. Misleading details can be planted into a person's memory for an event that actually occurred. It's also possible to plant entirely false memories, according to Elizabeth Loftus and Daniel Bernstein. Loftus has shown that false memories exist and also that feeling sure about a memory does not prove your memory is reliable. One factor is a false memory is a source of confusion. If a person has the gist trace of a memory rather than a verbatim trace, the memory is likely to be false or inaccurate. Psychological research is helping train police investigators from using interviewing techniques that can mislead witnesses. One example is pressing for more additional details when a witness has already expressed uncertainty. Section 2. 3 stages of memory. In sensory memory, each of the senses records its input in a distinct register. Sense data that receive attention are detailed in short-term memory. Information from short-term memory can be stored in long-term memory. If it is encoded and linked to other stored information, information can be quickly retrieved from long-term memory because long-term memory is structured or well-organized. So there's 3 stages of memory in this section. The main idea is that the 3 stages of memory storage is sensory input, short-term or working memory, and long-term memory. So what you want to be looking for in your notes on this section are, what are the 3 types of sensory memory? How does short-term memory work? And how do schemas affect long-term memory? Sensory memory is the first stage of information storage. It consists of immediate initial recording of data that enter through the senses. Psychologists believe that each of the 5 senses has a register. Mental pictures we form of visual stimuli are called icons, which are held in sensory register called iconic memory. Iconic memories are very brief. The rare ability to remember visual stimuli over long periods of time is called eidetic memory. Mental traces of sounds are held in a mental sensory register called echoic memory. Also called working memory, short-term memory is memory that holds information briefly before it's either stored in long-term memory or is forgotten. The primacy effect is the tendency to recall initial items or items in a series. The tendency to recall the last item or items in a series is called recency effect. There is no definitive explanation for primacy effect or recency effect. So what this is saying is that if I gave you a list of names, you would either remember the names at the beginning or the end, depending on how they were presented to you. So the primacy effect is you might remember the first 3 names and the last 3 names rather than all the others. And we see this like when we do memorize the list of presidents. The early presidents are easy to remember and the most recent presidents, but all those folks in the middle are tough. The organization items into familiar manageable units is called chunking. Psychologist George Miller found that the average person's short-term memory can hold a list of 7 items. Interference occurs when new information appears in short-term memory and takes place of what was already there. Short-term memory is a temporary solution to the problem of remembering information. It is the bridge between sensory memory and long-term memory. Long-term memory is the third and final stage of information storage. It is a stage of memory capable of relatively permanent storage. Memory is reconstruction. Memories are not recorded and played back like videos or movies. They are reconstructed from our experiences. We shape our memories according to the personal and individual ways in which we view the world. We tend to remember things in accordance with our beliefs and needs. Schemas are mental representations we form of the world by organizing bits of information into knowledge. Schemas influence the way we perceive things and the way our memories store what we perceive. Psychologists have not yet discovered a limit to how much we can store in a person's long-term memory. We do not store all of our experiences permanently. Our memory is limited by the amount of attention we pay to things. The memories we store in long-term memory are incidents and experiences that have the greatest impact on us. Section 3, at a glance, forgetting and memory improvement. The 3 basic remembering tasks are recognition, recall, and relearning. Much of what we think of remembering actually involves restructuring ideas based on associations. Forgetting or memory failure can be caused by malfunction in encoding, storage, or retrieval. Forgetting can occur at any stage of memory. Knowledge of how remembering and forgetting occur has led to practical techniques for improving memory. So the main idea of this section is the 3 tasks of remembering are recognition, recall, and relearning. Failure of any of these results in what we call forgetting. So in your note-taking, you should be sure to be looking for how does forgetting happen, what are the 3 basic memory tasks, and how are the 3 ways of forgetting different. What are some of our techniques for improving our memory? Forgetting can occur at any one of these 3 stages of memory. Information encoded in sensory memory decays almost immediately unless it is transferred into short-term memory. Short-term memory will disappear after 10 or 12 seconds unless it is transferred to long-term memory. Information stored in short-term memory is lost when it is displaced by new information. That's why when you're getting a whole list of names, it's hard to remember, because oftentimes the names get confused. The most familiar and significant cases of forgetting involve the inability to use information in long-term memory. Recognition is one of the 3 basic memory tasks that involves identifying objects or events that have been encountered before. It is the easiest of the memory tasks. This is why oftentimes when you start a subject, it's very hard for you to learn the material, and then after you've been doing it for a while, it's not hard at all. It's because you begin to recognize the patterns and the words and the type of language that is used in that particular area of study. Recall is the second memory task. It involves bringing something back to mind. In recall, you do not immediately recognize something you have come across before. You have to search for it and possibly reconstruct it in your mind. Relearning is the third basic memory task, is relearning. Relearning involves learning something a second time, usually in less time than it was originally learned. Math teachers have a real problem with this because they have what you call the, what do they call that? When you have summer vacation and students tend to forget a lot of what they learned the previous year in math class, and then they have to relearn it, but it doesn't take them as long because they've already learned it once before. Or in my case, they never really got it in the first place. Anyway, the ability to recall nonsense syllables drops sharply during the first hour of learning. After the first hour, memory loss becomes more gradual. Ebbinghaus measured the rate at which test subjects forgot a list of nonsense syllables. Subsequent research has shown that when the information to be learned is meaningful and significant, when there's reason to learn and remember it, forgetting slows considerably. And so that's why when we were talking about the PQ4R method, that you were to try to relate it to something personal in your life, because it'll be harder to forget in that instance. Much forgetting is due to interference or decay. Interference occurs when new information takes place of what has been placed in memory. Decay is the fading away of memory over time. Both are part of normal forgetting, and there are more extreme kinds of forgetting. Repression. Freud says we sometimes forget things on purpose without knowing it because some memories are painful and unpleasant. He called this kind of forgetting repression. Amnesia is a severe memory loss which is often caused by trauma to the brain. People with retrograde amnesia forget the period leading up to traumatic event. Memory loss of events after trauma is called anterograde amnesia. Infantile amnesia. We all have infantile amnesia. Retrograde amnesia and anterograde amnesia are extremely rare. One type of amnesia that everyone has is infantile amnesia, which is forgetting of events before age of 3. Infantile amnesia is based on biological and cognitive factors. Types of forgetting is the inability to remember. Because memory is such a complicated process, there are many ways in which it can go wrong. The first way that we talk about memory disappearing is decay, fading away of a memory over time. It's very hard to remember what happened in the first grade at this point in your life. Interference, displacement, disruption, distortion, or previously existing memories of new memories. As new things come in, it displaces or interferes with that ability to remember. Repression is subconscious forgetting to ease anxiety and guilt, shame, or emotional trouble. That repression is that thing that when you did something and you try to just forget that you ever did that, and where you embarrassed yourself, and you let that disappear from you. Amnesia is a severe memory loss, and typically it's caused by some sort of trauma or injury. Retrograde amnesia is the loss of memory of events that occurred prior to the trauma. Antegrade amnesia is the loss of ability to store new long-term memories. If you saw the movie 50 First Dates, that's what she suffered from, antegrade amnesia, where she wouldn't remember anything after a certain date. Drill and practice or repetition is one way to remember information. It's an effective way to transfer information from sensory memory to short-term memory and long-term memory. And this is one of the strategies that they discourage teachers from using, by the way. Relate to existing knowledge. Elaborative rehearsal is what we try to emphasize in education, is relating that information to what you already know is another way to improve your memory. Form unusual associations. Memory can be enhanced by forming unusual associations, where you find some sort of item to peg that to. And then, of course, you have mnemonic devices and chunking of information into catchy, easy, recognizable format. Okay, so I guess that concludes our chapter on memory. So I hope you are able to answer all your questions on this, and this concludes Chapter 7.